So here we're going to demonstrate the set UID bit, right? And how dangerous the set UID bit can be if it's not well controlled, right? So I'm logged in as my regular student user, right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to root. And I'm going to do that because I want to create a new user account, right? I didn't put the right password in. But before I do that, if I type the ID command, notice that my student user is in the sudoers group. I'm in the wheel group, which means I'm a sudoer, right? Which means I can do things like use sudo to change the password of another user account, right? Or, for example, I could add a new user, which I'm going to call new user, right? And then I can use the that same, the password command, for example. And I can set the password for this user. Right? Pretty straightforward, right? All this stuff works, but again, I'm in the sudoers group. Another thing I could do is I can use the yum command to install, and I'm going to install something called zshell. You're going to want to do the same thing if you're following along here. So I'm going to install zshell, which is just an alternative to bash, right? It's just a different shell. Now, the problem with zshell is that it doesn't have... it doesn't have the understanding that if somebody's running it as root, it doesn't have any controls built in, right? Now, if you look at other user accounts, right? So, or other programs, for example, right? For example, if I look at under USR bin, look at the password command, right? The password command, you can see that the set UID, but that's why it's highlighted in red, right? It's saying, hey, watch out, this executable or this binary runs as root, right? Or it runs as whoever owns it. In this case, root owns the file, so it runs as root, right? So if I run the password command, it's running under the context of root, right? Probably not a good thing. Now, let's say I make a copy of this file, right? So I'm going to use the cp command, and I am going to copy PASSWD. I'm going to copy it into my home directory. So home student PASSWD. So now I have a copy of PASSWD, right? I own it as student, right? I own that file. And if I try to run PASS, by the way, to put the / in front of it, right? Otherwise, it's going to run the real password command or user bin or USR bin. I want to run the one that's under my student account, right? So if I run the password command, right, this new version that's owned by me, and I want to change, for example, just change my own password, right? It's going to ask for my current password. And then my new password, which I'm going to make Camden, right? You can see it fails here, right? Now, why does it fail? Well, if I try to, for example, let's look at Etsy Shadow, right? Look at the permissions. So Etsy Shadow, nobody has permissions to it, right? And let's see if I can cat that file, right? If I just want to look at the contents of Etsy Shadow, permission denied. I don't have permission to do anything with the Shadow password file. In order to change a password, I'd have to have access to Shadow password, right? To the Shadow password file, right? Because that's where the password hash is stored. Now, of course, if I use the sudo command and I type Etsy /Etsy or cat / Etsy Shadow, right? Now I can see the contents of that file, but I had to prefix it with sudo, right? All right, now let me exit from that. So I exited completely out of my shell because what I want to do now is log in as... So now I'm going to log in as new user, right? Put my password in for new user, right? This is the account that I set up. If I run the sudo command, right? Let's say I want to change student's password, right? It's going to ask me for the password. It doesn't work because I'm not in the sudoers file. So new user is not in sudoers, right? If you look, I'm not in the wheel group, right? So I can't do anything. New user is a restricted lockdown account, right? Can't do anything with it. Now, of course, I can run the su command, and I could still get in as root with the su command, right? So that works because the su command makes you put in the root password, right? But I can't put my own password in and do things as root because I'm not in the sudo words group. Now, let's say, as an example here, I'm going to make a copy of, I installed that new shell, right? Z shell, right? I installed that with the yum command, and I'm going to make a copy of it. So actually, before I make a copy of it, let's take a look at it, right? So if we look at usr bin Z shell, you can see that Z shell, it's owned by root, but when anyone runs it, it's going to run under the context of the person who's running the application, not of root, right? As an example, let me exit from this. So now, let's see who I am, right? Oops, sorry. Who am I? So I'm new user right now, and if I run Z shell, and I'm just going to continue, right? So now I'm in Z shell. You can tell because I got the percent sign now, right? It's a different shell. And if I type who am I, it's my context, right? New user. It knows that I'm running as new user, not as somebody else, right? All right. So let's get back to the regular prompt. So what I'm going to do here, so for example, when let's say, when I made a copy of password, right? Let's take a look at home. I did that in student. I don't know if I'll be able to look at it, right? Access denied, right? The student, but I could do the same thing here. So I'm going to make a copy of /usr /bin /passwd, and I'm going to move it into my home directory, which is now new user. Right? Now notice that when I copy that file, the owner of the file is now me, right? So when I copy it, it takes on the permissions of whoever copies it, right? So the set UID bit is no longer set. I can't touch the version of that file that has a set UID set. Now, let's try something a little different here though, right? I'm going to log in as root again. Now let's say I'm the root, I'm the master administrator of this server. Oh crap, I got to type the right password though. So I am the administrator of this server, and let's say I want to make a copy of Z shell, and I'm only going to make a copy because I don't want to, well, you know what the heck. Let's just go ahead and make Z shell, set the set UID on Z shell. So I'm going to do change mode, U plus S, right, to set the set UID, and I'm going to do that on Z shell. So /usr /bin /Z shell. So now if I look at Z shell, right, you can see that the set UID bit is now set on Z shell, right? And let's just take a look at, for example, oops. If we look at bash, right? Oh, I forgot the AL on there. That's our normal command, right? Bash does not have the set UID bit set either, right? But I set it on Z shell. So Z shell now has the set UID bit set, which means when somebody runs Z shell, it's going to run to the context of root. But Z shell was not designed to run with the set UID bit set, right? It wasn't designed to work that way. So let me go ahead and exit. Now, once again, if I try to look at the contents of etc shadow, for example, right? Doesn't work. Permission denied, right? But now, as a regular user, not typing any passwords, I go into Z shell, and now I type cat /etc shadow, and holy crap, it works. It lets me see it, right? I now have access to do what I want with that file. I can view that file. I can see everybody's password hash, right? It doesn't care anymore. Why is that? Why did that work? Because I set the UID, right? I set the owner of Z shell is root. I set the set UID bit, right? So it'll run as root. It'll run to the root context, even if you're a different user. In fact, I'll prove it to you. If I type who am I, it thinks I'm root, right? Now, of course, it doesn't work for everything because it does still think that that I am new user, right? It doesn't know that, I'm running under the context of root, but it still knows that, that I can, that I'm running under user. But, let's just try something here, right? If I try to change bash, for example, right, and add the set UID bit on bash. Oops, got to do USR bin bash, right? Now, if I take a look at, let me go back and let's exit this, right? So again, I haven't typed my password in. All I did was run zshell, and I was able to change bash to add the set UID bit, right? So if I look at Etsy, I'm sorry, not Etsy, USR bin bash. Oh, I got to add the dash AL on here. Forgot the space. Sorry about that. All right, so the set UID bit is set, and let's try typing bash, right? Here's the cool thing, right? Bash is smart enough to know that if the set UID bit is set, don't let a regular user in as root, right? So it has that understanding that if, you know, for example, I type ID, it knows that I'm still new user, right? Because it knows my real user context is new user. But zshell didn't know that, right? Zshell wasn't designed to allow that. So you can see here, one minor screw up. All I did was put the set UID bit on zshell, and now any user on my system who runs zshell to get the zshell instead of bash, right? If that was their root, let's say somebody said, oh, I like the zshell, I'm going to make that my default shell. Anytime they log in, they got root right away, right? They don't have to do anything, and they've got root privileges to do whatever they want, right? Probably not a good thing, right? And you can see here, if I type the cat command, Etsy shadow, right, it's going to say access denied because it doesn't let me run as root, okay? Now, of course, it's really important to unwind all this stuff. We don't want to leave zshell out there, you know, with all this extra permission. So I'm going to exit from this to get back to my regular bash prompt. I'm going to run the su command, so I'm back in as the real root, not my fake root, which with the zshell command. And USR/bin/bash. So that's going to remove the set UID, and I'm going to do the same thing on zshell because I definitely don't want it on zshell, right? So now if I run the ls command and take a look at these, bash is now back to normal, and zshell is back to normal. So we're okay now, right? So that's it, right? So I was able to, you know, as a regular user with no permissions at all whatsoever, because the root put the set UID bit on zshell, which is just some alternative shell that doesn't have any controls in place. But think about all the other applications, binaries that you might have that don't really, you know, aren't designed to run with the set UID bit. If you set the, you know, if you set that bit because maybe it's convenient to do something, right? That's a huge vulnerability that somebody could take advantage of, right? So we kind of saw an example of that. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.